It's almost an incomplete thought to leave it at time heals all wounds, because time does heal wounds. It's just not time by itself. They said not only time heals all wounds. So time and support, time and community, time and therapy, time and counseling, time and prayer, like time and something, combination with a few other things, heals all wounds. You are here. Welcome to the Purpose Finder podcast. This is the show where we uncover why you are truly here, and more importantly, how to make it your reality. My father, the late Dr. Miles Monroe, said the greatest tragedy in life is not death, but life without purpose. And research further shows that people with a strong sense of purpose are 2.4 times more likely to feel fulfilled. Each week, I sit down with extraordinary guests, entrepreneurs, artists, thought leaders who are boldly living their why. We dive deep into their journeys, the struggles they've overcome, their breakthroughs, and the lessons that can help you do the same. I am your beautiful host, Charissa Monroe Wilborn, and we're about to explore the mindsets, tools, and strategies to help you live a life with purpose, passion, and legacy. Are you ready? Let's go and dive into the episode. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Purpose Finder Podcast. Here, our mission is simple: to inspire you to find and uncover your purpose and to live a life overflowing with what? 3 things: meaning, fulfillment, and significance. Yes, those are very important because deep down, we all crave belonging. Nobody wants to feel unfulfilled. And we are all searching to ask the big question: why am I here? Like, what is the answer to why in the world am I here? Well, let your search end right here on the Purpose Finder podcast. I'm your host, Charissa Monroe Wilborn, and today I have the incredible honor of sitting down with someone who doesn't only think about purpose, she doesn't only dream about it, she is actually living it out, and she is living it boldly. Dr. Vernita Glenn-White. To me, she is Dr. V. To most, she may be Dr. Glenn, but for now, she's Dr. Vernita Glenn-White. My dear, how are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for having me here with you. And I love the purpose finder. I love that. I think that's very important.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. Thank you for saying yes. I have been saying that to all of my guests because you could have said no for whatever reason, and you didn't. So you said yes not only to me, but you said yes to the thousands of people that are going to be tuning into this particular episode. And I know it's about to be a great one because you have a great story. You have great lessons to share. I'm not going to steal the show. They don't want to hear me talk. They definitely don't want to hear me read no bio.
Right.
So I'm going to allow you to tell us a little bit about you. What do you do? Your titles, your organization, any accolades. Just you tell us from your heart.
Okay, well, I appreciate the ask. So that's the first, in order for me to say yes, I had to be asked. So I thank you so much for the ask. And about me, I call myself the Brilliance Solutionist, and it's really because throughout my experiences, both personally and professionally, I found out that I am really good at helping people solve problems, but finding the right solution that best fits their problems. And I've been doing that for as long as I can remember. Like professionally, it was when I was teaching mathematics, both at the K-12 level and the college level. And then personally, a lot of my friends would come up and ask me like, well, what do you think about this? And I would offer my advice, or I would give them different things to think about so that they can come to the best solution for them. So throughout this entire journey of me coming here, I realized that I ultimately help people think, build, and achieve differently. And that's drawing on, like I said, my personal experiences and my professional experiences in mathematics, learning how to solve problems and come up with the right formulas and the right approach to solve problems and get the solution. So just putting all that together, I realized that tying into your purpose finder is if we think differently, build differently, and achieve differently, everyone will get on the path of discovering or uncovering their purpose. And I see myself as a guide or an advisor to help people figure out the best way that perfectly aligns with their beliefs and their values. So, in a nutshell, that's who I am, and those are the results that I provide.
Hey, think, believe, achieve. I
Mhm.
love it. And you're this brilliant solutionist. Is the name that the title you give yourself.
Mhm.
I think it's just an amazing title. But I know enough to know that you weren't always there.
Right.
And so, as we before we get started, when you think about what's your number one priority right now, we're at the beginning of 2025.
Mhm.
What is your number one priority right now?
My number one priority for personally for myself is to really put myself back out there after, and we'll get into it, after overcoming a lot of different things. It was a kind of a challenging transition going from, being this professional in this career as a former college professor, and then we'll talk about I got fired twice in the same year, and then coming into entrepreneurship, and that messed up a lot, like in my mind, like going with the mindset and everything, and how to shift what, it really meant to just be me with or without titles. And that was the biggest thing. So my focus this year is really bringing out that awareness about who I am and standing stronger on my true beliefs and my true values and my purpose, what I know that I've hidden for so long, standing behind titles. So I'll just say Q1. That's the the focus for Q1, is building back that self-awareness to let people really know who I am, what I do, and the results that I provide, not just from something that I read about, but for something that I live through, and want to help other people with that as well. So that's my focus.
Beautiful. Putting yourself back out there and
Hmm.
letting people recognize and know who I am. And I
Right.
love it. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the journey to this,
Hmm.
like get to know who I am. Let's talk about this journey to where you are now as a brilliant solutionist. Um
Hmm.
you were employed, so you went from employer to entrepreneur. There was some self-doubt that you had to overcome. You just mentioned you got fired twice. So give us the whole short of the long, if you will, story of what what Vernita, because at that time you were Vernita.
Yeah.
Before you got to Dr. Vernita has been like the challenges, the adversities.
So I always knew that I was a pretty smart chick. I already knew that going from, high school and everything, going into college. And so I never like put myself like, hey, I'm the smartest person in the room, but I knew academically I was strong, right? And went through my career as a K-12 teacher, and then moved up, through the ranks and things like that. I was on track to be one of the youngest assistant principals in my district at the time, and my big goal was to be the US Secretary of Education. That's what I wanted to do, right? But then some things shifted in my professional career, where I was like, so many people are in these leadership roles telling people what to do, and they have no experience, no expertise in the area. My area was mathematics, and they're trying to tell my team what to do. And I was like one of the youngest people over a team of 17 mathematics teachers. So I decided, you know what, let me just get my PhD. And most people, like, they dream about it, they think about it, they research. I didn't. I was like, oh yeah, let me go do that. And then it was like, well, what do I get my PhD in? And I was like, well, let me go find something that a lot of people don't go to work. So in my profession, a lot of people were going and getting their EDD or their doctorate degree in education or leadership or organization management, things like that. I was like, I want to stand out. Let me go mathematics, because that was my undergrad degree. So I was like, yeah, let's just end it with that. And as I was making that decision was, I think around like October of 2012, no, 2011. January 2012, my grandfather passed away, and then February 2012, my mother passed away. Oh man, what am I about to do? And before my mother transitioned, she was like, "Okay, I need you to go and get this degree. You got to accept it. So I need you to finish it." So that was one of her dying wishes. Like, you never start something and don't finish it. So she passes away February. Now, mind you, my grandfather passed away that January. I start school in August of 2012. And from there, I went through, and this is really crazy, because then I had to go back and understand grief. I thought I dealt with grief during that summer part. I was like, okay, let me hurry up and get all my feelings out of the way because I have to go to school. School is something I know how to do well. So we did everything. I thought I processed all of my emotions, and I went to school, finished my doctorate degree in 3 years. In that time, I didn't realize the psychological impact that it would have because, like I said, I always thought I was a strong student academically. But going into the PhD process, especially in mathematics, and someone that looks like me, it's like kind of like, were you here because they needed to fill a quota, kind of thing. And I had to constantly prove myself. And I had never dealt with that academically. Yes, I know that, some racism or prejudice, they exist. And you deal with that like socially. But, it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. But academically, for me, I thought that was like the equal playing field. And it had proven that way all of my life until I got to that level, and that just messed me up more than I could imagine. And the hell that I went through to really prove myself or to know that I belonged, and I didn't have my mother or my grandfather like my safety net there. So it was like all these new things that I was experiencing coming up. Fast forward, yes, I finished, but it was the hardest thing that I had to do professionally, and I didn't have my mother there. But I'm thinking I'm strong enough. I got it. Let's get this on and popping. And then around like when I was right after I graduated, about a year or so after, so 2016, someone asked me, was I still depressed about my mother? And I was like, still depressed? Like I was never depressed, right? But lo and behold, I didn't know I had bottled up all of those emotions and I just broke down completely. Like yes, I cried and everything when she passed away, but it was the emotions of that on top of everything that I had to process during that doctoral program, and the floodgates just opened. And I experienced all of these new feelings and things that I had never discovered or and had to deal with before. And so I found myself again bearing myself professionally, and I was like, okay, I'm this college professor now. Let me go ahead and do that. Didn't want to be a college professor, but I was like, yeah, might as well, right? And I did that, and again, another thing to experience, that I had never had to experience things, proving myself, challenging, being challenged on things that I know. And for me, it's like I never go into a situation unless I'm 100% certain and confident. So academically, I could do that, but then it's like when people are challenging you, I took it personally. I think a lot of people take things personally. So I did that, and I was like, well, how can I transition or reinvent myself again? And I was like, well, let me just go be this powerful speaker, because apparently that's what I need to do. Because as a professor, you teach, you research, you write, and one of the things you do is you go out and speak at conferences. But I was like, I want to stand out. I don't just want to be a presenter or just a speaker or a talker. And I came across a great professional speaker, Lisa Nichols, and I was like, okay, great. So me and my friend, we were like, well, we're gonna go be speakers. He found somebody he wanted to follow. I found somebody I wanted to follow, and so I like, well, let me up level my speaking game. And that was around like 2019 or yeah, 2019, and I was like, oh, in order for me to be this next level speaker, there were a lot of things that I had never really dealt with. And from being wanting to become a more powerful speaker, that led into this whirlwind of personal development. I was strong professionally and I could go to all the conferences and trainings, but I had never done that personally. And that was the long way around to how I got here on a personal development leading into entrepreneurship. And then that's kind of how we got connected on that path.
That is how you and I got connected.
So that was
Yes,
the whole backstory.
and I'm going to work my way backwards to. I'm going to start from what you just said, and then I have a few points I want to bring back to the forefront. And I'm glad you mentioned in all of this entrepreneurship, you brought in the personal development aspect. You didn't just leave it at wanting to have your own company and make all this money, but yet you're going through this grief and loss. But yet there's also the personal development side that people tend to leave out.
Yes.
They tend to think, like, one thing I learned from Danita actually was your business development, your professional development will only go as high as your personal development. And so when she said that, it's not that I didn't know that, but she gave it words, and then she gave it a complete sentence, and then she gave it a concept. And I never forget that your professional development, your business, your finances will always be only as good or to whatever level your personal development is. So even when I produce events or I create events, I make sure that no matter what the event is, there's always going to be a two part. If it's business, then we gonna have business and personal development. If it's a retreat to Husa, and we gonna have whatever and personal development. Like it's good, because for me, you can't have you, and it's almost as though I want to actually separate personal development and spiritual development as well, because even as humans, we're this three part: mind, body, spirit.
Mhm.
And so, yes, the mind can be working fine, the body can be working fine, but if the spirit is broken, if the spirit is unresolved, if the spirit is unhealed, if the spirit is not up to par, then you can try all day long to get your mind and body to be right there, but you're going to always wonder, man, why do I keep hitting this plateau?
Yep.
And can't seem to go anywhere. So I'm glad to hear that after you did all of this, there is still something else that you wanted to add, and that was the personal development part. And of course, we know Lisa Nichols is one of the best to do it in the personal development department. And then as we go back, you talk a lot about, like you first mentioned, you always knew that you was a smart chick.
Mhm.
Your exact words. I love it. She knew she was a smart chick, and you knew this from young.
Yeah.
What are you able to pinpoint what it is in your childhood
Mhm.
or what it is in your rearing that fostered that confidence of, I always knew I was a smart chick?
Well, one, it was told to me by my grandparents and my mother, and they always allowed me to explore and navigate without editing anything that I did. Now they say, like looking back, like before my mom and everything passed, they're like, "Man, we created a monster." But they encouraged me to do things that I had never done before, or they allowed me to like I started off as an engineer major undergrad, and that was from being able to take things apart with my grandfather, put things back together, and they just let me do things. They let me break things, figure it out. I didn't get in trouble for a lot of things like that. So it was at home a lot. And then when I got to school, I went to a private school early on, and we were there to just be able to, like, they talked to us like we were like big kids, and we just did things like that, and we had conversations, and I was always getting these awards, to say, hey, you're smart, you got the gold star. Or, I was in a lot of competitions, academic competitions, and we would win. I would win. So it was a lot of reinforcement. I was like, oh, there's something to this, you know? And it was, and then it was the environment around me. Like other people were really smart too. So I didn't always feel like I'm the one that was superior. If they knew that I knew things and things that I didn't, other people knew, and we just complimented, even like on playgrounds. And as I was young, I was always on team building, things like that. So that was just my environment growing up, both home, even in church, and after school programs. So I experienced it. It was told to me, and then I was like, there was some evidence, and then I started to own it.
And I asked that question because I share the same sentiments of confidence, if you will. And but I also know that there are so many other people that don't. So I always shy away, and I'm so happy to hear you just be so bold and say, I always knew that I was a smart chick. And I wanted to say ditto, but I'm like, here I am trying to be all humble. But I too came from a home. I came from a background where I had aunts and uncles. I had two amazing parents. I had grandparents who spoke positive into my life,
Mm-hmm.
who told me that I can do anything I put my mind to do, who told me that there's nothing name can't. So as soon as the only thing I got in trouble for was saying to my father, I can't.
Yeah.
And he told me up to the day he passed, he would say, there is nothing name can't. And so that's one of the biggest advice that I walk away with as a even as a 40-plus-year-old adult. Nothing name can't. Nothing name can't. And but there are so many other people who have made it to the apex of, or to one of the apex, if you will, of their professional life, their personal life. But their backstory is they were told that you will never amount to anything. Even my dad, the greatest of the greatest, was told that you were stupid, you're not smart. Um, and so I wanted to put it out there that yes, you have those persons who came from where they started out as someone belittling them, speaking negative into their life. But here it is, you and I don't have that
Mm-hmm.
story. I don't have that part of my journey. My journey's a little different, but it doesn't start with someone telling me you will never amount to anything, and now I have to go and figure out how I'm going to prove them the heck wrong, because really and truly I am worthy. Um, so I love that you said, and I'm going to say it over and over again. I always knew I was a smart chick. Like that's exactly what you said, and I didn't look at it as arrogance. I just saw confidence, and I wanted to find out what was it, because I want to speak to those persons who who may not have children yet,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to have children, or you're just starting a home. Like one of the best things any mother and father can do for their child is to speak life into them.
Right.
And not only life into them as an infant, speak life into them as adult, speak life into their future, speak life into the possibilities and the opportunities that are going to come their way, speak favor into their journey on discovering their purpose as they grow up, because they can grow up to be like myself and Dr. Vernita, who was like, I always knew I was smart. I always knew I would amount to whatever it is that God would have for me. But it was my responsibility to make sure that I figure that out and then do what needs to be done. Um, so I'm glad you brought that to the forefront. And then you talked about one of the things that I think we should talk a little bit more of today, because you and I both have experienced grief
Mm-hmm.
and loss. They may have looked different, but there is the rest of the world that experiences grief and loss all day, every day, for different reasons. And just like you, I remember thinking, no, I'm good. I'm dealing with this well. Can't you tell? Not knowing. Then I bump up to you know who,
Right.
Miss Lisa Nichols, and she tell you, yeah, before I know you want to build your business and I know you want to make more money. She said, but before we do that, let's let's get some stuff fixed here and cleaned up here and cleared up here with your personal development side. And she brought to the forefront of my existence that you still had a door to close
Mm-hmm.
from the grief perspective, and your business was not going to do any growth until you had dealt with that.
Right.
And that was the hardest pill that I had to swallow,
Mm-hmm.
because there were some things that I needed to touch from a grief perspective that I didn't want to touch. So therefore, I just tell everybody, no, I'm good, you know? Um, so what are some of the things that you did during your grief healing journey that helped?
Well, one thing, going back to when we talked about the confidence, like I had it as a child, but then I realized that it was covered up when I became an adult, when I was going through that process. And it ties in with grief, my doctoral process. It ties in with grief because while I had those affirming words growing up, when my mother passed away, it was like I didn't have that same sense of affirming as I was going through a new challenge. So it was kind of like I it was there, but it was the challenges of people saying the opposite, of not believing that I was smart as I was. I didn't have anything to combat that, you know. So I struggled with it as an adult, and that's what led to, you know, me doing some work to get that back. Like it's been there, but it was buried. That's what I want to say. It was buried deep down, because I didn't have my mother to help me, like kind of just shovel off the dirt, you know. And then I had my grandmother still, but it was kind of like, well, your grandma, you know. So that I wanted to touch on that, like you know, it was good all the way up until like a situation can change, and it's not that I don't think you lose your confidence, it just gets buried, and that's what happened to me. Now, dealing with grief, like I said, first of all, I had to realize, like, sometimes being an academic or being smart or being a researcher or being that person, it can be like a pitfall because it's like, let me go research and let me learn what I need to learn. So I go research the 7 stages of grief, and I say, I'm going to go through this myself. I can check off these boxes. Again, sometimes you're too smart for your own good. I was like, okay, this is, let me feel my emotions. Let me go through all of this. And it was like, chick, that is not how this goes.
It works. It doesn't work that
You
way.
cannot intellectualize yourself out of it. And so for a brief moment, I did have
Mm,
therapy.
hold on. Let me
Mhm.
stop you. You cannot intellectualize yourself
Yeah.
out of an emotional
No.
state. I love it. And that is so important. I just wanted to say it because I wanted people to get that nugget right there. You cannot intellectualize yourself on an emotional state. And intellectual is all head,
Mhm.
emotional is all heart. And
Exactly.
so what we tend to do is we tend to disconnect the two. If I could disconnect my heart and my head, then I can operate in one without the other and be good.
Right. And that's how I
Boom.
got through finishing in 3 years. I was like, I couldn't let myself sit too long to feel anything. So I was like, I had to keep it moving. And the way that I knew how to keep it moving was to keep learning stuff. Right. That's why I got 5 degrees. It was like, hey, there's a problem here. So I eventually did go to therapy for a little bit. Like, I think therapy is important. Now, some people may disagree. I don't think you have to go there forever, but I do think you just need to identify there are some times. So I had to go there, and I had a few sessions to really say, well, what is this? And the therapist helped me to get some of these things out, and I was like, oh, okay. And I was good at that point, but then that's when I was like, okay, let me take a step back, and then I got into what personal development was. Now I now use the phrase personal leadership, and that's because, and something you said too, when it was so much just personal development, it was just me constantly working on myself and doing all the things. And there was a moment of time where I did separate personal development and spiritual growth. Like, I'm a Christian, I grew up in the church. Like, I know, the Bible and everything. But for some reason, I disconnected the two. And it was different from, in personal development, you do hear that, spirituality and things like that. But as a Christian, it was like the word of God. And so it was a couple of
Not
years.
not this universe.
Right.
The universe is fine.
And I found myself, and I've said this on videos on my YouTube channel where I did talk about, saying like it was conflicted. I was like, well, I'm learning this new stuff about personal development and personal growth, and I understand what they're saying about universe, and I'll always say universe, or I call him God and things like that. And then I had to come to a fork in the road. I was like, no, this is what it is. It's God for me. And so I had to come back from separating the two and bringing them back, and finding that all the things I was learning, the foundation is the word of God. And I could not separate myself from the word of God. All the things that my mom had taught me, all the things that I personally experienced. So while I was trying to self-help my way through grief, it snowballed into something bigger until I came back to my core values and belief systems as a Christian, and then walking through the whole grieving process and growing and getting back confident through the word of God. So again, the researcher side of me, I would find things that I was learning in personal development, tie them back to scripture, and then make it practical to myself. And I had to start developing my own faith and not just living off the faith of my mom or my church family, because now it was something I had to experience myself. Like, I knew God, I believed I have relationship with God and things like that, but you don't know where your relationship stands until a situation happened. And for me, it was grief in several stages. It was my family grief, and then it was also professional grief. And it was a whole identity shift that I had to encounter.
And grief, even as a it's funny, you talk about being, you're so smart. You're like, let me go look at the stages of grief. And I, of course, I'm a medical social worker, and so I was working in social work for years before my parents passed. And but I've helped so many other people, clients, patients with their loss, whether it's a loss of a limb, because I worked in medicine,
Mm-hmm.
loss of a limb, loss of a organ, loss of home, loss of a loved one, and you work them through it, you process them through the process. And so I'm like, I got this. I'm good. I'm not going to
Right.
be depressed. I'm not going to be anxious. I'm not going to suffer from PTSD. I
Hmm.
know what I'm doing. I don't need a therapist.
Right.
And that was me for a long time. My mom, though, was past 2014 and all the way up until I met Lisa in 2020, maybe 2021. I allowed myself to just go through the process very slowly.
Hmm.
And then I also had enough confidence to say, and to know that everyone processes grief differently. That
Hmm.
was my excuse. And then the same dabda of the grief process, I said, I don't have to go through those stages in order.
Right.
So I knew.
Remember that.
So there we are intellectualizing. So I knew that I'm good. Um, and then come to find out, and Lisa, of course, she wasn't a therapist by any means, but she had done personal development work enough to recognize grief, recognize the one or two things that was missing in my healing process. And she was able to label it for me and
Mhm.
then say, this is what we got to go through. You got to hit the ground before you could reach the sky.
Right.
And it was hard, but it was the best thing that could have happened.
Hmm.
Best thing that could have happened. And so even when I try to think of it, when I think of advice, like what advice would you give to someone right now
Hmm.
who, and we're not talking about just grief currently, we're talking about grief that's from a loss that may have happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or if it was just yesterday. What advice would you give to someone now going through their healing process of grief and loss? Hey, purpose seekers. If this conversation has you thinking about your purpose, what it is, how to find it, and how to truly live it, then I have something just for you. Introducing the Purpose Finder Formula. You have the free access to my 20-minute training designed to help you uncover your purpose and to start living it with confidence. No fluff, no guesswork. It's clear, practical, step-by-step guide to finding meaning and gaining clarity and direction. Your purpose is calling. Are you ready to answer? Head over to www.charissamonroe.com/purpose finder formula. Enter your info and I'll send it straight to your inbox. Imagine waking up every day knowing your life has meaning, impact, and joy. That's what awaits you. So don't wait. Grab your free training today. Now, let's get back to the episode.
One, be honest with yourself about the feelings that you're feeling. Don't try to hurry up and get over it. And no matter what people say, they say, well, time heals all wounds. No, it does. No, it doesn't. Time doesn't. But allow yourself to feel it and go through the process on your own time, but then don't wallow in it either. Because I've experienced people who are, it's going to sound bad to say, but they're still hung up on the passing of someone, and they're still living in that moment. You have to be able to honor the life that they had and a life you had with them, and still move forward with your life because they're no longer here. So take yourself off the hook, for whatever it is. If you need to forgive someone, if you're wondering if they forgave you, if there's something in there that you're still holding on to, you have to give yourself permission to just let it go and work through it. And then start doing things that allows you to remember them, but then create new experiences for yourself. We used to, like, my sister and I used to have sister dates where we would go out on our mother's birthday. And it was really good for a while, but then I was like, I noticed that we would still like get sad in the moment. So I was like, well, let's not do it on her birthday. Let's create something different between us that we can hold on to, because our mom is still going to be our mom, but we don't have to like memorialize. Now, this may not work for everyone. I'm just saying this is what I had to do, not just stay in the trap of, well, here it is, it's mom's birthday and, we're feeling all sad. We just had to change it up. Or here's a personal leadership or personal development phrase. We have to reframe the story in our mind. I know it sounds like, like, oh, here we go. But honestly, that's the best way, is to reframe the situation that's going on, because your body and your mind really can't tell, honestly. And when you do that and you create those new experiences and you create those new stories in your mind, you'll find that you are healing faster than if you were just always thinking about what happened and the feelings of the past. I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So those are a few things
Absolutely.
that I've done, and with myself, with my grandmother, and with my sister.
And one of the things you mentioned the cliche phrase that we use a lot, time heals all wounds. And it wasn't until recently where I heard someone take that even further, to the point where we have been it's almost an incomplete thought to leave it at time heals all wounds, because time does heal wounds. It's just not time by itself.
Mm-hmm.
They
Right.
said they said not only time heals all wounds. So time and support,
Yeah, I like
time and community,
that. Mm-hmm.
time and therapy,
Mm-hmm.
time and counseling, time and prayer, like time and something, combination with a few other things, heals all wounds.
Yeah, I
But if
like
you
that.
leave it just as time and you do nothing else,
Yeah,
yes, you're going to try and figure out time heals all wounds, but 50 years, you're still wounded.
exactly.
When in 20 years, you could have been at a healed state or a resolved state,
Yeah.
and then living the next 30 years of your life pain free, if you will. And I literally just learned that within the last, I want to say, 3 4 5 months.
Okay.
Had I heard that concept go a little further years ago, I may have done a little more than
Right.
my intellect was telling me.
Mm-hmm.
um but I just thought it was just brilliant when someone said not only time heals all wounds. It does, just not by itself.
Right.
Just not by itself. And so as we go, so there's grief. You mentioned the grief and the loss in the midst of you going through your doctor program.
Mm-hmm.
But somewhere in there, you still didn't let that stop you.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings me down to purpose. Like when can you remember when, not from a date perspective, maybe just a season or a time frame, where you understood and answered the calling on your life and you started living your life purposefully?
So my mom always said that I would be a great teacher. And she would say that my purpose was to teach people things. I took that literally and became a teacher. Right. I dropped out of engineering and I was like, well, maybe I'm supposed to be a teacher because my mom said so. But I think now that I'm understanding, there's a gift of teaching. If you read the Bible, and if you're into spiritual gifts, it didn't mean that I literally had to become like a professional teacher. I believe like the time that was my calling or assignment, and that was the vehicle. But being in this space of becoming like this entrepreneur business person, this whole reinvention of myself, is I was always meant to teach people things and draw out the best in people. And I can pinpoint one time where I was working over the summer and we were in this program. I work with this program, Tapping Talent Early. And we work with, was it elementary going to middle, and then middle to high school students. And it was like a summer camp, but it was our job to figure out what were they really great at doing, and then guide them on the path, either going to middle school or going to high school. And I remember where I could literally spotlight all of these things that these children were great at that people were missing. One, because I listened, and two, because I knew how to ask the right questions. This is before I knew anything about personal development, any of that, purpose talk, any of that. It was just something that was naturally a natural gift. And so I didn't make the connection then. I didn't know, like, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do in life. I was like, I'm just being a good teacher, right? But as I'm going through personal leadership and entrepreneurship and finding my lane, or coming into the coaching industry or the advice industry, I was like, I am good at that. And when my mom passed and I wrote a book with from her thoughts, and with my sister, I realized that I didn't want anybody else to leave this planet without having their brilliance on display, because that is what happened with my mom.
Mhm.
She did some amazing things, but when she passed away and I was going through a lot of her things, I found goals she wanted to accomplish. She had the outline for the book that I used for my first book. She had all of these things she wanted to do, but she didn't have either the resources or the people around her to draw that out or to teach her, a different perspective. And so I was like, I don't ever want that to happen to anyone else. And so a mission that I had been working on that I didn't start saying out loud until probably the end of 2024 was I want to bankrupt a billion burial plots. And I was like, it sounds morbid, but I wanted to help more people live a life poured out above ground before all of their genius goes underground, because we hear the graveyard is the wealthiest place on the planet.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's a problem. We need to bankrupt that graveyard. And so the best way I knew how to do that was to teach people things. And that's why I became a college professor. Well, that's not why, but since I was in that calling, or that was my next assignment, I also realized there that there were kids who were into certain majors because their parents told them to, or they thought that was the best thing for them. And then after a few conversations with me, they changed their majors. They changed sometimes universities. Some of them left to go pursue different things. I was like, oh my gosh, costing the university money. I'm like, well,
Bankrupting these people.
I'm like,
Bankrupting institutions.
I was like, you don't belong here. I mean, because it was like there's something greater for you to do. And all I could see was like, hey, again, tapping talent early, or putting drawing out the brilliance. So I had I had some different type of guidance, I probably would not have gone into teaching like that. But it all worked out. But if I still had some other guidance to know when I transitioned from being an employee to an entrepreneur, where someone could show me that, hey, this gift of teaching can show up in this different way, it would have been a lot an easier transition. And now I'm just now coming to understand that my overall purpose is teaching, through life lessons or things that I learned. I can synthesize information quickly. I can make complex things really complex concepts. That's what I'm trying to say. I can make them simple and practical for people to do. So it was always there. It was just depending on which vehicle that I was going to use. But now in entrepreneurship, I get to drive that ship, and I know that my big purpose, like I said, is teaching people, and is drawing out was already in them in a systematic way. Did I answer your
I
question?
always knew. I always wondered, but then I always knew why and that you and I are and were sisters at heart, if you will. Because even as I listen to your why, like the why you do,
Mm-hmm.
like why you teach and what you don't, I don't even have to ask you the question, what does purpose mean to you? I can tell. And it's because I hear a lot of me in it. Like I hear even you saying my desire is to bankrupt a billion burial plots. Like that is the same thing as saying as my dad drilling into me, which is now the undergirding of my work and who I am, is die empty.
Mm-hmm.
Like the grave truly is already rich. It don't need another cent. It don't
Right.
need another gift. It doesn't need another talent. Please, like literally, which is why this podcast is an addition to any other purpose resource I'm creating, any other event that I do, because I want to help people truly uncover their purpose, but not only uncover it, because I find that a lot of people are uncovering their purpose, they're finding their purpose, but then they're covering it back up,
Yes.
or they're not living it because it's too big,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or it's out of their league, so they think, or it's they don't know, they don't know what in the world. Like I don't even know how to start that, and so there is. I know what my purpose is, but I don't think I can touch it. Like I'm scared. I'm scared of the unknown, and so my goal is to help them, empower them to uncover it, but then also live it. And I hear you. I love that you have taken what could have been a very dark uh part of your life, part of your memory of your mom, and you've taken it and said, "No, I can use what my mom was going to do Even though she can't do it, she left all these breadcrumbs, if you will. Why wouldn't I still bring her brilliance to the forefront of her not being here? And so you said you found an outline of a book that she wanted to write, and you chose to go ahead and write it. Like, that is making something, that is reframing what could have been the ugliest photo of your life history, into something so beautiful. And you get to talk about this book always being, this is the outline of a book that my mom wanted to write. Gone too soon, died before she can, but my sister and I get to, get to write it, and it still be her. And that's the way that, if we as people, if you're listening to us and this is you, and you have been dark, you've been in deep just pain, and you don't know how to turn or how to reframe what could be a horrible picture. Imagine my parents dying in a plane crash. Like the picture for me will always be my parents going up in flames, both of them, in a plane crash. That's a picture. I can't do anything with a picture. But the frame that I put around that picture for it to be something beautiful is why 10 years later I can have a Purpose Finder podcast and be smiling looking like this, because I've decided that, yeah, that's the picture, but the frame that I put around it can be beautiful. Can be beautiful. And so I'm glad to hear you even mention the reframing and what you had to do, and the advice that you gave to our listeners. And I'm sure someone needs to hear that. And then, not only not only did you say, I always knew that I was a smart chick, you also said, my goal, and I don't know if you said was, I'm going to say is, to be the U.S. Secretary of Education.
Yes,
I said, okay,
yes,
Mr.
it
President.
was.
Okay, Mr. President. I love it. I love it. I love it. But reaching for the sky, like they say, and falling in the clouds, it's amazing. Like, it's beautiful. Dream. Don't let anyone tell you you don't have dreams, or don't let anyone tell you your dreams are too big.
Right.
Like, that may have been a big dream when you had it at the time,
Hmm.
but look at you now. You're not the U.S. Secretary of Education, but you are how many degrees, doing what in math, and doing, like, like you went from employer to entrepreneur, and then you've had to overcome self doubt.
Hmm.
Talk to us a little bit about where the self doubt came, because keep in mind, this is also the same girl that is saying,
Hmm.
I always knew I was a smart chick,
Right.
but then somewhere self doubt got in. So help us understand where that came from and how you overcame that.
So it really, where I can pinpoint it, it really showed itself, like I said, transitioning from being an employee to an entrepreneur. I used to say I was an accidental entrepreneur, because I never was like, I'm going to do my own thing. I always thought to have something on the side. I was always going to build a consulting agency, from education and things like that. But it never occurred to me to be this full time, here you go, you're an entrepreneur, start, all of that. But I always had that skill set, but just never transferred it to like business, right? So when I got, so I stopped saying accidental, because I'm like, well, God doesn't make things on accident. So if you're keep saying accidental, you're going to keep showing up like an accident. So stop that. So I had to do that. But then it's like when I got fired from being a college professor, and it took a long time for me to say those words, fired, because when I was embarrassed, and I was like, how you go? You got 5 degrees. How are you fired? You've never been fired a day in your life. And I was fired because I didn't fit the mold. It was nothing that I did academically, professionally, or anything like that. It was, I literally don't belong here. And it was all personal. And when you experience something like that from a place that's not supposed to be personal, but on where you, like, I'm the smart girl. Like, I know I'm great at this. I have a PhD in, where I'm supposed to be. So when someone is telling you you don't belong here, it's like, so has all of that been a lie at that point? And that's where it started kind of in my doctoral program, but it was just like, yeah, whatever, y'all are, whatever. But when it's your job, your career, then and that's been my identity all of my life, being the smart girl or having all of this. When that's taken away from you, or so you think, that creates a lot of, who am I? I'm not as smart as I thought. I couldn't even keep this job. And then when I got hired to be a consultant for a robotics company, and again got fired from, because as soon as I got fired from being a college professor, I was hired to do some work from a consulting company. That's a long story too, but I did that. Then they let me go because it was another fit. It had nothing to do with my competence, but all I could see was I'm getting fired again from something professionally. Does that mean it's me? Like, again, has all of this been a lie? So am I not that chick, who I thought I was, right? So that's where the self-doubt came from. And then starting in entrepreneurship, starting a business, and then, I was always second guessing myself at that point. I had never done that, but I started doing that. And when I would go reach out to people and say, hey, I'm starting my consultancy as a math consultant or leadership consultant, people would tell me no. I would do all of this, and it was like where I was always given opportunities, or it was always a yes. Now things are starting to be no's, and doors aren't opening. So it was like, oh crap, then I am, this has been fake this whole time. So that's where the self-doubt, that I can pinpoint, like for real, where it occurred and where I had to do a lot of work coming out of that hold, and rebuilding that confidence and certainty in myself. But when you are faced with a lot of no's where your whole life had been yeses, that is, for me, that's where the self-doubt came in.
So what's the work that you put in? What is some of the work that you put in to get out of that?
So what I had to do, and this was like just transparent moment, like probably within the last couple months, I'll say last maybe, we could say 2024. So I got fired in 2021, right? So the last couple years, I've been like just in this daze. I have been doing, and that's the thing about why I say in my book, Embracing Grit for Greatness, I'm becoming professionally powerful through personal empowerment. When you've put yourself out there professionally, or when you've let a certain level of brilliance shine, whatever you do after that, people are kind of like, it's still good to people. And we've heard it. What's the phrase? Like sometimes your 75% or your 50% can look like somebody else's 110, and you know. So the thing that kind of helped was I was still doing things like, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, it's so amazing!" I'm like, "No, it's not." But
Why you speaking my language, reading my book, my history book, because that is the truth. I knew I wasn't doing my best.
no,
I
right,
knew I wasn't doing nothing.
nothing.
People were like, "Oh, you're doing so well after your parents passed." Really? I'm not doing anything.
I was like, this is crap. So I had, I don't mean to laugh, but and for the last couple of years, I'm like spiraling like that. I'm like busy doing things, and it's creating this whirlwind. And I just had to just get back to my core. I'm like, this is not what's up. You know better. So I had to really get back into alignment. This whole last year is really about being getting realigned, because I already knew what I was supposed to be doing in the world, but it's getting back aligned to what my true purpose is. And I had to find that North Star again. Like, okay, God is like, I'm not telling you anything else until you do what I told you to do. So I was like, all right, you got it. So I had to go back and say, okay, what were all of the gifts and talents and everything? I heard this from someone, Tag. So talents, abilities, and gifts. That's not mine. But talents, abilities, and gifts. What were those things that I've already had beyond a degree? And I had to do a lot of identity shifting, because my whole identity was rooted in my academics and my professionalism and my titles. And so I had to say, who am I beyond my positions, titles, and degrees? And that was a lot of work, because, all these years I had been that chick. Then I had to realize, without all of that, I'm still that chick. And that's something I had to come into realization about. And then so it was like using all of my tags and then putting it towards entrepreneurship, and stop trying to fit the mold of everybody else. And yes, success leaves clues, but those clues are not like your recipe or your framework, your ingredients, right? You can pick them up, but that doesn't mean that you're supposed to be that. Like, your cake is not going to come out like their cake. So stop trying to get their cake. So I had to do that and stop trying to follow every single thing. And I had to come back to trusting myself, my star player. I had to come back and say, okay, there's a reason why you had all these degrees and all of that success in this area. You know, you can transfer those skills and transfer that belief into what you're doing now. And like I said, probably within the last year, maybe like the last 8 months or so, that's what I had to do. And to get back trusting myself and rebuilding my confidence and certainty in myself, and then learn new skills about business. Like, it's okay that I didn't know everything. That's where, like, you're not smart over here yet, okay? But you're smart enough to learn. And that's where I had to be like, oh, it's okay. Like, everyone's not expecting me to know that. That's the story I told myself, right? That I have to know everything, or I should be smart enough. No, baby, this is not your thing. So you just have to learn it. And once you learn it and do it, then you can be that chick in this area. So again, so just to sum all that up, I had to realign with my purpose. I had to get in alignment with my true identity and not the identity of my positions, titles, or degrees, and then transfer the skills. Like, if I was successful over here, I can be successful right here, and then just stop fighting God and do what He told me to do.
Love it, love it. And I love that you chose to go back to the word, go back to your identity, go back to why you were created and how you were created,
Mm-hmm.
versus going back to the books or asking somebody else,
Yeah.
or like you went back to what's my tag? Like, what's my tag number? Which is different from somebody else.
Yep.
My talents, I have abilities, I have gifts. What are they again?
Mm-hmm.
And that's going back to your creator, because your creator gave you all of your ability, all of your gifts, all of your talents, and you chose to go back there. You chose to realign with your original purpose, the original reason and intent, and the identity, and then say, I can transfer. Like, I don't have to. So it's almost as though the nose that you got
Mm-hmm.
was the best thing that could happen to you.
Right. Yep.
And sometimes, and I'm glad you're so open about it, because sometimes persons like yourself and myself and even others who believe they are smart in in every area, um, that they can do it all and they can do anything. And sometimes we almost need not a reality check, but sometimes we need a humility check, if you will. Um, Not to say that you weren't humbled. That's not what I'm saying. But sometimes we just need we need that no, so that we could look into other areas. We need that no, so we could elevate to another apex. We may be at apex now, but really and truly there are more mountaintops. So why not get to them? This apex you're at, unfortunately, is now the valley of another mountain that you can climb. But we get to the top and we think, oh, good, we're there. I'm that smart chick, boo. And then you realize, oh, I ain't so smart. They tell me no too. I know. Wait a minute. I
Mm-hmm.
thought I was that chick.
Yep.
When really you are. You just it's almost like a different. We just need you at different level now.
Right.
And I'm glad that you were smart enough to learn. You were smart enough to say, I could learn. There is still more to learn.
Right.
There's still more to learn. I think that's even a greater building of character for someone who already knew and who already was that smart chick. Um, that's awesome. So, if you had to give the best advice to our listeners, whether it's summing up what you already said or just giving the best advice that maybe you were given, what would you give to our audience right now?
The best advice. I said it a little bit, but I'll say it again. Tune into your star player. I got that from Cat Williams, by the way. But your star player, and I say that because, again, it sounds cliche, but everything you need to know about who you are, what you're supposed to do, is inside. You just have to take that quiet time to really sit there, and that's why I start up with my overall, again, mission: think, build, and achieve differently. The first part is you have to think. You have to really sit there and think and be honest with yourself and take yourself through this process about who am I, what do I really want, and what have I already accomplished. And when you tap into your star player, you filter anything else that's coming to you externally through that through line. And that's something that I did not do when I was going through all of, personal growth and learning all these things and business and all of that. It was all just random little things. And it wasn't until I filtered it through the lens of my purpose and vision that it started making sense, because I had to tune in back to my star player. So if you're out looking and you're feeling like, I don't know my purpose, one, yes, you do. You know it. You just have to have the courage to accept it. I do believe that. And then any advice or strategies or coaching that you're getting, you have to filter that through your value system, your belief system, and then that's how you're able to make decisions. So that would be my advice to the listeners.
I love it. I love it. Tap into your star player, ladies and gentlemen. Your star player, not somebody else's star player, not a player that you deem as a star, but your star player.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. V, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, how can we and the listeners glean from you? How can they be taught by you? What do you have that we can access? Please let us know how you can best serve us.
Well, one way, there are two. One way, I talked about my book, Embracing Grit for Greatness, Becoming Professionally Powerful Through Personal Empowerment. It's available on Amazon or directly from my website, drvernitaglenn.white.com. But if you really want to just start doing the actual work, the tangible work, it is going through my complimentary resource library. A lot of things that I've talked about, workbooks, just actual process of the work. And that is in the vault, like a bank vault, drvernitaglenn-white.com/resources. And those are complimentary because I believe that you can coach yourself first before you start getting into like external help. We all need external help, but there is some work that you can do on your own to get the groundwork started. And that's going through some of those resources that I have available.
People, you heard it. Yes, you have to put in the work. She's making it accessible to you. It's complimentary. That also means that it's free, FREE. Please make sure you visit her website. I'll make sure I put that in the description for easier access. Let's take away all the excuses.
Yeah.
You want to continue gleaning from this intelligent, brilliant solutionist. You want her to be a part of your team. You may have a mentor already, you may have a coach or not. She's a great, great resource. Dr. V, thank you so much for being here. And so I've been asking all of my guests this question because I always end on one of my favorite things in life. Like when I say my favorite thing, it is my favorite thing in life, and that's food. I'm sorry. But yes, it is food. I am a foodie. I love food. I love good food. I love all kinds of food. I will try anything, but it just needs to taste good.
Same.
So, what is your favorite food and your favorite restaurant?
Oh gosh. I don't have a favorite food. I love steak though. Like I love a good
Okay.
medium steak by itself, flame on the open flame.
Okay.
um, a favorite restaurant. I don't have a favorite restaurant. I just go for who has a great steak at the moment.
I was about to ask which restaurant has a great medium steak?
A few here in Central Florida, Christinger. Well, it used to be Del Frisco's. I think it's still Christinger's now. Uh, you can't go wrong with a Texas Roadhouse. I know you go high end and low end. A good Texas
Okay.
Roadhouse.
Okay. I like it. I like it. It's
Yeah,
good to
but
know.
yeah, I love a good steak. And uh, Cooper's Hawk
Okay.
is
I
a
know
good.
Cooper talk
Yeah,
well. I know Cooper talk well. Okay.
yeah.
So you
So
got some.
a good. Yeah, I always, if I'm gonna go out, I look for who has it. Like, what are you saying about the steak? I know people are gonna say something about red meat and all of that, but I love a good steak. Nothing on it because
Hey,
my granddaddy loves
my
my steak.
husband loves a good steak,
You don't need to add
and it needs to
anything
be
on it
pink.
if it's done right.
It needs to be red. It can't be just brown though. It got to be pink,
It
and it
does,
can't
yeah.
be
My
yeah.
grandmother orders them medium well, and every time someone says, "Well, how does she want it?" Well, she wants it burnt because, like,
Christy.
it has to have pink in it. I used to
I
eat
love
them
it. I love it.
medium rare because that's how my granddad ate them. But then I was like, okay, maybe that's a little too much, so I'll do. No, I used to eat them rare, but now I do medium rare to medium.
Oh yeah, that's too much. Too
Yeah,
much.
a rare. I was like, oh, I
No,
can't anymore.
no judgment, but rare is too much.
Yeah, my granddad used to eat them. It's too much for me now, but now I'll go medium rare or medium. But now I know this.
Medium.
I have to say medium rare. Sounds bad, but a lot of times I would get judged, like, "Oh, you don't mean that," and they would end up cooking it well because they're like, "Oh, you don't know how to eat it." So if I wanted, I would have to get it medium rare,
Ah,
and then it'll come out a perfect medium. Yeah, they will always do
please
it,
give me what I asked for, sir. I
and I
don't
was like,
need
I
you to
wouldn't
tell me
send it
what I
back. I
like.
don't know what y'all gonna do to my food, but
Exactly. Oh, thank you so much. This was beautiful. This was beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that the journey, the stories, the advice, the lessons that you heard from Dr. Vernita's talk today has helped you, has opened doors, has closed the doors that need to be closed, has given you the answer you may have needed. Let's just love on her. Let's thank her. We celebrate you. But I also celebrate all of you that are listening and watching us here. We hope that you decide and choose to discover your purpose, uncover the purpose that you already know, and live it boldly. Living boldly. This is another episode of the Purpose Finder Formula with your host, Charissa Monroe Wilborn. Until next time, see you soon. Bye. And ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap on this episode of the Purpose Finder podcast. I hope today's conversation lit a fire within you because purpose isn't just something you chase, it is something you live every single day. If this episode resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more people on their journey to purpose. Let's continue the journey together. Join the Purpose Finder community on Facebook for exclusive insights, tools, and a tribe of purpose-driven people just like you. And remember, the two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. Your purpose isn't far off. It's already within you. It's time for you to uncover it and live it boldly. Until next time, stay inspired, stay intentional, and keep walking in your purpose.